This is In Center Ring. I'm your host, Jonathan Lee Iverson. Standing at a statuesque 6 feet 5 inches tall, her presence is as undeniable as her impact. An award-winning speaker, leader, and fighter. In Center Ring presents Dr. Libra Forde.
At the end of the day, our ancestors have fought for us, didn't know our names, and often did not make it through, right? But we're here to talk about it because of their sacrifice. So I have no fear. I'm aware, I'm very aware of the fact that there's people out there that do not like what I have to say, but it's not going to stop me.
For those who don't know, me and this wonderful warrior queen here went to high school together. And
Only
she
the
wasn't
best high
troublemaker when we was in school. At least I didn't know her to be.
I actually was. I just was very quiet about it. But that's a whole nother story. I was always very observant. And my father, before I talk about the school, I remember in third grade, this woman, the principal, calling my father over when she was coming to pick me up. And she said to him, God, Libra just doesn't talk. We're worried about her, and her learning ability because she's never talking. And he looked at them, he looked at me, he said, ain't nothing wrong with her. She gets in the car, she tells me everything y'all do. Every little thing. So that's kind of like who I am. But anyway, so the school here, my kids go to school here and I'm always going to volunteer. Wherever my kids are, I'm going to volunteer. That's just the way it works, right? Because if you show up, then people are less likely to do damage to the people that they know. And so with that, I'm always showing up for my kids. And so the principal at the time at their elementary school, I guess he volunteered me to be on this thing called a naming committee. They were building a new high school out in this district. And because I was so active, he put my name forward as a person that should be on this committee. So not knowing, I said, sure, no problem. It's a naming committee. We're naming a school. It's not that deep, right? Not even knowing really what I was in for. So it turned out to be a 2-year process because, of course, when I walk in, they start saying things like, oh, we should name it Hood River. And I come from the hood, so I was like, yeah, no. And the more names they came up with, I was like, oh, you're all pretty ignorant. Mm-hmm. Oh, this is a problem. So I was like, let's get some history here. And let's talk about historically how we can put a name on a building that children beyond our existence will walk through. And it's a name that they can be proud of and we all can be proud of, right? And so we did a survey and all these like racist comments came back. I mean, it was awful. It was also eye-opening for me to see.
Name a building?
Naming a building. It was unbelievable. The things that people said they didn't want their kids to identify with and why. I mean, some deep-rooted ignorance. So all of that just gave me a lot of energy to fight for kids, to see how important it is to have people from their community that look different from them, but are doing big things in their community, be the name. And so, so this happened to be a friend of mine, and I called her one night, and I said, do you mind if I put your name down? And she said, sure, because we both were like, it ain't going nowhere. But at least we put the name down, right? And then lo and behold, her name moved to the second cycle, then the third, and it just got more volatile as we moved through. And then we voted on it. They voted it down because they said she was living and because people of color often have issues and they didn't want to have to change the name in the future. That's the reason why they didn't want it to be her name. And so that just made me have more energy behind the name because I was like, oh, well, let me tell you why you're so wrong. And so we just kept pushing, and then got it back on the ballot. So initially we put down Adrian Nelson as the high school, and that got voted down. And of course, like any other vote, once it's voted down, you can't bring it forth again. And so we brought it forth again as Adrian C. Nelson. That's her middle name. Because it's a different name, it's not the same name. And and I'm just a jerk like that, right? So why not? And the second time it went through. because the first time when they voted it down, I was really clear with the board. I was not on the board at that time. I was just a volunteer. And when they voted it down, it was 5 males, 2 females on the board, 5 white males, 2 females, 1 person of color, Asian woman, and then a white woman. And I just said to them, I said, I find this very interesting that you guys, your reasoning for voting this down because she may make a mistake. I think that's a very racist statement to make. You would never make it about anyone else. And there's another school here named after a gentleman who's alive. And I'm sure you didn't make that statement when you named it after that white male. Mm. And so when I said that on the record, they could not speak back to me. But afterwards, I had more conversations with each board member, like, you guys, you got to check yourselves. Where's this coming from? And then the second time, they finally voted it through. So Adrian C. Nelson is being built. It's a $90 million building. It's beautiful. And super excited for kids to walk underneath her name and be at that school, because she's a dope human being.
Now, what was her sentiments during this whole process? How did she feel about it? Like, that somebody would even think to name a building after her.
Well, she was in a whirlwind at that time, right? Like, she had just been put into this role as the first Black woman, first Black period, Supreme Court in Oregon. So she was already in this kind of funnel of energy around her. So she was pretty aware of that. And then she came from Arkansas, where she was, her mother sued the school for not allowing her to be the valedictorian, even though she was technically the valedictorian based on her grades and all the things she had done. The school said she couldn't do it. So she was very aware of the adversity that was in front of us. But anyone that knows me, she's also like, but I know you, Libra, so you would not let this go. So we just go ride with it. So she was cool. She was cool.
It's so fascinating to me, because there's always this talk now around the many Confederate statues and assemblage that is being torn down, taken down, removed, what have you. And of course, the argument for its, let's say, the middle of the road moderate defenders is, well, you can't deny history and you need to leave history up there. And we all know that statues and names on buildings, all those things are tributes to the actual people.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And so it's so fascinating that anybody, because I'm sure they would be in the same camp of those middle of the road moderates who would defend some horrendous people and some horrendous symbols,
That's right.
A lot of which continue to stand in Washington, D.C. But, where here you have this living, breathing piece of history there, and everybody's hesitant to honor it. That is something else. That is very deep.
And it was really based on real estate, I found out.
Really?
Because there's this concept in real estate that if a elementary school, middle school, and a high school all have the same city name, it's easier to sell property. So they really wanted it to be Happy Valley High School, because that's the city that we're in. And there's a middle school like that, and there's a elementary school like that. And so they felt they could sell more property that way. And so my argument to them was that you prefer to teach your children the benefit of money than the benefit of human compassion and honoring humans that do well for us. To me, there's no equal sign there, and I refuse to be a part of that. So of course, when I would say this is systemic racism, those folks would say, no, we're real estate people. We're not racist. No, you are. That's what systemic racism is. You guys are putting money over people that do for this community. That's a problem. And so that really was eye-opening for me, right? Like, I kind of knew that, but I didn't know that that was like such a push. And they have so much money behind real estate, right? So there were people coming from all over the place, like, we have to name it this. It's like, whoa, how did this become such a big deal? Oh, billions.
That is a big deal. Like, that real estate money, they don't play. And there's so much that goes on all over the country in regards to real estate that a lot of us aren't even aware of, why they're making these choices, moves that they make. And it's all these I say there's shadow powers, and it centers around land. It centers around some of the most mundane things that we take for granted, but they're power players behind a lot of this stuff. I guess they they didn't know any better because, being that you're the goat of speakers, you know, you're, you're a champion.
No, not at all.
I'm gonna call it out on your Toastmasters. You out here conquering the world and in the speaker's world. I'm just because listen, I'm a fan, and when I read up that you did basically a three-peat, but you won twice in the same year in a different state. I think you're causing problems. Now, please let our audience in on it. Your Toastmasters, you're a Toastmaster. You are a renowned speaker, and I'm gonna let you have the floor on that because when I looked at that part of your bio, I just was laughing. I'm like, you got to be that greedy. Come on, 3 states.
Yeah, I didn't even know what I was doing. No, I honestly, when I joined Toastmasters, it was because I was looking for my voice, and I really wanted a place to speak up about some serious pain that was just coming up. I think anyone that has been through their 30s will tell you it's kind of this weird crossroads. The 30s is where you identify some things that you never really reflected on before. And some of it's really good and some of it's really painful. And so when you find those things, you have to find an outlet, right? And everybody's different. People find different things as an outlet. For me, I wanted to voice it somehow, and I didn't know how. And I stumbled upon Toastmasters because I was looking up how to magnify your voice, and it was the first thing that came up was Toastmasters, and I had never thought of it. In fact, when it came up, I laughed because I thought it was like a party crew or something. It's Toastmasters, right? The name is weird. So, but then I saw they had a meeting. I said, oh, I'll go anyway. So you walk in, and it has a very warm, it's usually a very warm group. My group in Hawaii was amazing. It will always be my original group, Kapolei Toastmasters. And they were just very welcoming, and they allowed me to speak probably my 3rd time in, it's a thing called Table Topics where anybody in the room can get up. It's not a prepared speech. They ask you a question and you answer it. And when I answered it, this guy named Owen he's a lawyer. So he was there to enhance his depositions. He says to me, hey, bring that speech you just did, bring that to this event on this day. And I go, okay. So I show up and I do my speech. And it turns out at the end that I win. It was a competition, and I had no idea, right? So the whole time, they were talking about it, but I didn't think that my speech was part of the competition. Right. Owen just told me to bring it, and I trusted Owen, so I just showed up. And then he looks at me, and he's like, okay, now you got to bring another speech to this one. And it went on until I got to the state championships. And at that point, I started asking more questions because I realized, oh, this is a big deal. I probably should know what I'm in for. And he's like, yeah, it's actually an international speech contest. And if you win this one today, the state championship, you go to Malaysia and compete against like world national champions, right? I'm like, wait, what? So anyway, I won. And but in the middle of me winning, I also was moving. Because remember, I didn't know what I was doing. So I had this whole life that was going on. So I was moving to Oregon at the same time. So I won Hawaii. I went to Malaysia. I didn't win. I came in the top, I think I was top like 10. It goes from like 38,000, and then you get to the big one, and it's like 1,000 of us, and then it just keeps going down. I didn't win that year, and then I was like, oh, that was cool. I'll do it again in Oregon. And so I joined the Toastmasters, but this time I knew what I was in for, and I kept going, and I kept winning. And honestly, I wasn't planning on winning there either because I was in a new state. And I won the state again. And so people were pretty pissed off at me. They're like, this is the first time this has ever happened because no one moves, right, in the middle. What is happening? But it was the best thing for me because speaking to people about my story, because what I learned from Toastmasters is the best way to connect to people is to tell your story from your heart. Let your heart speak through your tongue. And I was able to do that in a very comfortable place and really develop an understanding of some of the pains and some of the things that I was going through in my 30s. And then I would express it through speech. And they teach you how to structure that, where you take them on a roller coaster ride and you take people down, right? So they're going up with you and you take them down, but not so far down that you can't bring them back up. And that lesson was just invaluable to me, because every time I talk to people, I'm constantly thinking about the response and the psychological needs of people when they're listening to you, and what they need from you in order to be listening and actually receive what you're saying. Best experience of my life was Toastmasters, and continues to be. I love that group.
This is interesting because this is very much in line with what you got your doctorate in, leadership, and understanding the dynamics of how people work. Now, I know you're very, very humble about your doctorate. I'm not. I think if somebody stays in school that long, I'm calling them doctor all day. Let them give me an honorary doctor, and I am a doctorate tomorrow. I just think it's wonderful. I mean, that you would end up, in all places, Malaysia. And I'm curious to know how the audience took to you, when you came to speak to a different culture, and, how did that work out?
Yeah, so at the time, I was actually speaking about the domestic violence that I had experienced myself. That was the pain that I was speaking about. And so going to Malaysia, there was a room full of men and women, but all the women were fully covered in full traditional garb. You could only see their eyes. And after I was done, and I spoke my truth, so my truth in a Muslim-dominant culture was about being dominated by males. And it was a very interesting place to have that speech, because that wasn't something that women talked about. So all the women afterwards were just in tears.
Wow.
Energized and wanting to speak up. And that was just powerful for me, because it no longer became my healing. I realized that everything I had studied with Toastmasters became the opportunity to heal others. And that was really powerful for me.
This is wonderful. I mean, Toastmasters speaking was your pivot. It was your pivot into another life. Yeah. Now, before that, I mean, we've discussed this before. You were a reluctant basketball player. I mean, you are a woman of great presence and size. You are a chocolate Amazon. That's what, so, you got a lot of presence. And I mean, and I'm thinking, I always kept thinking to myself, I'm like, man, I can imagine her just getting out there, going into those corporate meetings and running into some, little insecure dude. Because, it's just not the presence in them dimples. Don't be, I'm trying to live right. But it's the brains, it's the advocacy, it's the heart for advocacy, it's the brilliance, all that in one pack. That's a lot. And it's one of these challenges I don't think a lot of us talk about very much. I mean, tall people don't really complain, but I mean, especially being a woman of just magnificent presence. That's how I see it.
Yeah.
Men, we're a bit fragile. We have these interesting egos. And I'm thinking, here you are, all this woman, and then you got the audacity to open your mouth.
Right.
And got, what, she brilliant too? I got to deal with that too. I need to know, and maybe this is a broad question, but I'm just curious to know what those interactions had to be like in the corporate world.
It's just not fun. You're constantly in this place of dimming your light. And for me, as a domestic violence survivor, it wasn't just in my professional world, it was in my home. And so I had gotten to a place where my light was just so dim, because there's just so few that can see your brightness and be okay with it, or that's how I felt at the time. And so, and I remember things my father used to tell me, right? Like he used to tell me, there's only one you. He was an actor, so he had like all these acting analogies. All other roles are taken. You've been given this role, like he had them all, right? But when I was a kid, I was just like, I don't get it. But As an
Maybe
adult, I get it.
football.
Like, yeah, I was like, I don't want to hear that. And then he used to always say things like, you got to figure out what your height really means. It's great you play basketball. It's great that you're beautiful, but what does it mean? Right? Like, what are you doing with it? And so all these messages were in my head, but then my experience didn't match this kind of empowering messages that I got from my father. My experience was, you're too much. You're doing too much. You're making everything too much. You know, it was a very different message in the public for me. And so that's what I really had to work out in myself and figure out how I was going to play this role that my father said was given to only me. And then what I realized was, once I found my voice, that was part of the role. And being tall became a draw. And so it was no longer a deficit for me. It became a really big positive. And instead of dimming my light so people felt more comfortable, because that's what I started to do, because when people were uncomfortable, I was like, okay, let me just kind of shrink myself so I can fit in and make people feel better. I just show up how I want people to receive me. And if they can't receive me, I no longer take on that responsibility of trying to help you receive me. I am who I am. I've been given this role and I play it well. and I approach life from, this is how I want to be received, how I want to receive you. And if you cannot do that, I understand, but I'm not going to change who I am. And that's the message I try to tell all people I meet. You gotta be all of you. Second that you're not all of you is the second that people can see through you, and then they don't want to deal with you. It's disingenuous.
So there has to be a certain kind of courage to just go on and just be what you are and flaunt what you got.
Yeah. I think it's courage and also self-awareness, right? There's a level of self-awareness in being all of you. And when I say self-awareness, you have to figure out why you want to do what you do in your life, because then no one else can change your what and your how after that. If you're not solid in that, then people will always change what you're doing, how you're doing it, when you do it, who you do it for. You're forever flopping around.
Yeah.
And for me, my why has always been really solid. I want to see people be their best selves. That's my why. I want to see people thrive because I know what it's like to be less than your best self. That's the life that I've grown out of. And so now I'm on a mission. Like, if I meet someone, I'm like, no, what do we need to do? You deserve to be your best self. How do I help you get there?
Well, let's explain. This brings us to your wonderful work with Self-Enhancement Inc., which is a fantastic non-for-profit right out there in Oregon. Please tell me about it.
Oh, so Self-Enhancement Inc. was founded as a basketball camp by Mr. Hobson, Tony Hobson Sr. And his focus was really on Black kids that he was seeing as a counselor who needed something outside of school. So basketball is what he knew. And so they started that way. But then after basketball, they would say to him, well, where are you at night or on the weekends when the gangs are out and I don't know what to do with my life? And so he grew it into this multi-service agency. We service kids from second grade to age 25. And their families, to make sure the kid is either a graduate from college, 2-year or more, or has a living wage job. And the purpose is that, you know, in the Black community, there's not enough people embracing the good in it. And so we really embrace the good of a kid. We believe that they can be successful, and anything in their life that might hinder them, like their family having financial issues or housing issues, we're going to step in and help, because that is what it takes to get the kid to the end. So it's an amazing agency. I think that we need one all over the world. I wish that I had one when I was growing up. But it's just amazing. And it's in the middle of Oregon. It's like, whoa, it's just such an odd place for it to be. But appropriate at the same time, because there's so few supports for Black Americans in Oregon.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, using your education, which is massive, even though you playing, saintly right now. your wonderful career as a speaker.
Well, I told you before, Black folks don't care about no education. I got an education so white folks will listen. Honestly, I can care less. I just want y'all to listen. Oh, okay. Now you're listening.
Right, here's my credentials.
Right, here's my credentials. You still got Libra from Harlem, though, in front of you. Let's just be clear.
Right. That's the curious thing. Like, how would you maneuver that? I mean, I figure now with Self-Enhancement Inc., I mean, you definitely can be more yourself. You can be your full self,
Yeah.
as opposed to that previous life where it's like you have to maneuver and you have to come up with all these masks to wear just to function in the world.
Yeah. But SEI has also helped me realize that I don't have to do that anymore either. I came from white America where I used to do all that, like dress a certain way. Now I show up at, city council meetings, mayor meetings, rallies. I'm dressed up, but I love sneakers. So I always got some kicks on. I'll wear a gown and some crazy kicks, because that's who I am. And SEI has really taught me that I can do that no matter who's in front of me and demand that they accept me as I am instead of me showing up how they'll accept me, because that's where you start to diminish yourself. And so now I'm completely 1000% showing up as Libra. And if you don't like it, it's not my problem. That's your problem.
I love it. I want to hit on, your recent, I saw the pictures on Instagram and they looked rather epic. You had the mic, you had the finger out. You were talking about checkmate.
Yeah.
Woo.
I drove away from that saying, oh my God, did I just say that?
That's that speaker. That's that speaker that snuck up on you.
Right. And it is really how I felt. You know what I mean?
Now, what was it for? What particular, was this for a rally? Was it for a protest? What was
so it was a actual peaceful sit-in in a town called Milwaukee, which is historically a very racist city in Oregon.
So it was Milwaukee, Oregon?
Milwaukee, Oregon.
Wow.
It's spelled different than the other Milwaukee, though. So it's spelled different with different letters. But very, very got some interesting history to it. And so driving up to it, I can honestly say I had some deep-rooted triggers, right? Like I was feeling some kind of way going to this city. It's my next door city, but I'm very aware of its issues because I live so close to it. I'm also aware of how Black people of Portland feel about the city, like they don't come and things like that. So I approached it from I don't know what's going to happen. I had brought some of my own people from Portland. I was like, I just need your eyes. I don't know what this is going to be. And so I had approached it from a very strategic place. And as I sat there and listened to these Black children say poems and they go to school in this city, it just gave me a lot of energy, right? Because we had all these people there listening and they wanted to know, and they were like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. Can't believe it's happening. I was like, okay, so I need you to stop with the can't believe, because it's happening. And I love analogies, because what I find is a lot of folks understand analogies because it is something that's relatable to them. People that are not Black do not know what it's like to be Black. They just don't. We can say it over and over again. They just don't. And a lot of them don't want to. Because to be honest with you, many things we fight, why would you want any of this? And so if you can ignore it, you absolutely will. So analogies to me allow someone to not ignore it. Like you have to put yourself in the shoes. So the analogy I used that day when I said, check F and mate was about chess, and I believe that most of our issues, we have so many, but they're rooted in systems, and the systems were never built for people that look like you and I, or anyone of any color. Actually, definitely not any females, not even white females. And so my analogy talks about the king being the center of this whole thing, and around the king, there's a centerpiece. There's a center energy of control, And then the development of that control comes from developing all your pieces. And then there's materials of building money and collecting materials, gathering other pieces, making sure that what you need is not on the opponent's side, it's only on your side. All these things are the objectives of chess. And the last objective are the pawns. And the pawns have been Black people. And we've been disposable, and we've been less than respected, and we protect all these other four objectives. And so my objective in rooting people in that, people get chess, people respect chess. It's one of those games like, you're smart if you play chess, right? It's an intelligent game. Oh my God, I know chess. Okay, cool. So let's all be smart together. And then when I was done, my last thing was, okay, so now what do you need to do? Well, we got to break the systems up, because the systems are only built to keep this little king safe, the king that don't look like none of us. And so we got to stop it. And I said, so, and what you feel right now, this energy of people centering around Black Lives Matter and Black people having enough and being over it, it's really us saying, checkmate. The game is over. That's it. That's what it comes down to. And people get that, right? Because again, these are all things that in life we've used as like, man, I know more than you. I'm better than you because I play chess, or I know this. And so all those things draw people in, especially people of a dominant culture, because they're like, that's how I feel anyway. And so as you draw them in, again, this is Toastmaster, come on, get closer and closer. Now you right up on me. Now I'm just like, yo, let me just slap you in the face with this. It's over. So that's now my new quote.
Yeah, that's a t-shirt. This particular sit-in, this was related to what we're currently experiencing with the recent uprisings regarding the death of George Floyd and others, obviously. I just love the fact that you basically rewrote your story. You know, I mean, you rewrote your story. I mean, here it is. It's fascinating that your father would put this blessing on you, so to speak, you know, speaking this over you, what roles you play, and, you know, you're the only, what are you going to do with this height? What are you going to do with your looks, your brilliance? What are you going to do with that? And you go.
Well, it's never my looks, because he was very clear. Your looks don't mean nothing. He didn't use nothing, though. My father was very explicit. Right. But he's like, let's go away. Yeah, what are you going to do with this? It goes nowhere.
The more and more I've interacted with women and gotten serious in real conversations, women with great presence who obviously have a lot of talent. It's like this universal story of having to dumb yourself down, to play demure, to come up with all sorts of vehicles to function in the world, because the world just can't accept you just as you are, just as you are. Yeah. And for Black women, I can only imagine it's even more.
And what I say to that is, the world doesn't have to accept us. We have to change the world, right? There's a quote that says, "Don't let the world change your smile; change the world with your smile." And I really believe that. And you can change the world with your presence. If it's not specifically your smile, you can change the world with your presence. And as we talk about my father, you know, I think, as women, as we grow and find our space and really are leaders in prominent areas right now, and I'm just so excited about that. I don't want us to do to males what has been done to us. I think that we can do this together. I don't think that it needs to be us or them. I think that we all need each other, because I'm perfectly clear that my confidence came from my father's injection of key things in my life that made me stand tall. And so it just helps me, it reminds myself that I'm not here to do this by myself. None of us are. We need each other. All genders, all identities. We need them all to exist and to have full balance.
I love it. See, there you go. Dr. Libra Forde. That is a prescription I can live on.